Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this Shabbat. Thank you for this time together to study your word. We pray this study would be fruitful for you and that it would be in our hearts and in our actions. In Yehoshua's name, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, let me know if I'm freezing up or you can't hear me or see me. I'm gonna start just by reading Genesis 1 through 5 today. And we're gonna focus in on verse 4. So verse 1 starts again, and it happened when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and when daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were good, and they took wives for themselves from all whom they chose. And Yehoshua said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, in his erring he is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore to them. They were mighty men who existed of old, men of renown. And Yehoshua saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So I want to analyze some words in this verse to hopefully help us see something bigger and perhaps more conceptual. And again, I'm not going to attempt to identify who these giants were or tell you how they came to be, but rather see what we may be able to glean from a more spiritual perspective by looking at how else some of these descriptive words are used in the scriptures. We can see here that the hearts of men, that is to say mankind, was set on evil all the day, and mankind had corrupted the way of Elohim in the earth. But in the middle of telling us about this corruption, we're also told that there were these certain mighty men in the earth in these days of Noah when all of this corruption was happening, and when the sons of God were mixing with the daughters of men. There were also these mighty men in the earth in those days and also after those days. Most translations read something like this, like the modern King James. And the structure of this verse just is very interesting to me because it's like there's a statement being interjected within another statement. And so this is the statement here that's being interjected in the middle of a statement. Like it's clarifying or establishing a time frame for us as to when these mighty men were in the earth in those days, being those days we just talked about in verse 2 that said, in those days when the sons of God, when they came into the daughters of men, those are the days we're talking about. But I kind of saw this sentence like there were like two bookends or like a sandwich that had this something in between. And so if we were to bring the two ends together, reading it without this interjectory statement, for me it made it a little easier to understand the point of the sentence. So I'm just going to highlight those two bookends for us so we can see it more clearly. So this is like the sentence that flows. There were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. They were mighty men who existed of old, men of renown. It just kind of made a little clearer in my mind to look at it that way. And this is what we're going to focus on. So just on a surface level, what can we see? We can see that there were these beings identified in this translation as giants. We can see that they were mighty, and it says they were of old or from old in the Hebrew. It also tells us they were men and that they were renowned. And these are the Hebrew words that we're going to look at a little more closely. And we'll see how else they're used in the scriptures. I think it'll give us a little more clarity on a few things anyway, at least it did for me. So the first word we're going to look at is this word translated as giants. Most translations say something like this, that there were giants in the land in those days. But then you have other versions of the scriptures, other translations, such as this one, the scriptures version. And it reads like this: the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. And that those were the mighty men who were of old, the men of name. I like this translation because they chose to retain the Hebrew word, and that's this right here, Nephilim. Because this causes the reader to then ask, what's a Nephilim? Which is good, because it makes us more inclined to dig a little, instead of just settling on the idea that we're simply talking about large people in the earth. So I'm going to be toggling back and forth between a couple of programs here. I want to look at this word, Nephilim, in the Strong's Concordance. And I just like the way this program works a little better. It's a little easier for me to navigate. So this is the word translated as giants. It's the Hebrew word Nephil. And Nephil is the singular form of Nephilim, which is plural. The plural form is used in this verse. We can see that it's a masculine noun, so we're talking about persons. And while this word says properly a feller, that is a bully or tyrant or giant. So we can see that while this word may be associated with being some kind of bully, tyrant, or giant, the Strong's says properly a feller. That is to say, if we were to translate this properly or more accurately, it means a feller. And so what is a feller? It's not like a, hey, feller, how's it going? But rather it is, we'd have to look at this root word, nephal, where it comes from, to find out what that means. And nephal means to fall, to lie, be cast down. And this is a verb. So this is something that's happening. You're falling. And this is the root for this word, Nephilim. Strong says to fall, to be cast down, to throw down. There's a variety of applications that are being used here, but basically it means to fall. And this word, as you can see, is used 434 times, according to Strong's, literally holding the meaning to fall down. And it could be falling down prostrate in humility or in worship, or it could mean to fall down as in death, as in many men fell that day. It can mean a falling as in to fall away from serving Yehoshua to serve men, or to fall away to the nations. It can also mean to fall into a deep sleep. In fact, the first time this word is used in the Bible is in Genesis 2:21 to describe the deep sleep that fell upon Adam when God opened his side to create Eve. If you'll recall also, this was the word used to describe how Cain became angry and his face or his countenance fell after his offering was not accepted by God. And God asked him, "Why is your face fallen?" And we talked about how this could be symbolic of how his face went from looking in a heavenly direction toward serving God and standing upright like a man and being heavenly minded, to falling in an earthly direction when he killed his brother, taking on the image and likeness of a beast who goes on all fours with its face to the earth. And he became carnally minded, focusing on the things of the earth or things of the world and of men, falling away from God. Another interesting place that this word is used, I'm going to switch back to my other program, is in Isaiah 14. And this is describing Lucifer's fall. Isaiah 14:12 through 15. How you have fallen from the heaven, O Hillel. Actually, let me switch back to my modern King James Version so we can be easier to read. How you have fallen from the heavens, O shining star. And that's the word Lucifer. Sometimes it's translated as Lucifer, means shining star. Son of the morning. how you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. So we can see he is this fallen one who fell from heaven. Verse 13, for you have said in your heart, I will go up to the heavens. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. And I will go up above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Just an interesting side note here, verse 13, where he's saying in his heart, I'm going to elevate myself to the throne and be like God. I'm going to sit in the mount of the congregation. That word congregation is that Hebrew word moed, which is where we get our word for the feast of the Lord, the Moedim. So he's going to sit in the mount of the appointed times, or it can also just mean congregation. But we know that Satan, he's the one that changes things to change times and laws, as it talks about in the book of Daniel. So we know, he's trying to keep us from keeping the appointed times of God. So I just thought that was something I wanted to point out, not related necessarily to what the point I'm making here. But so we can see that this word nafal, it's used here, Satan's literally falling from heaven here. We can see that it has that literal meaning, but it can also have like a spiritual implication, a spiritual falling. So we can see a literal falling from a heavenly state to an earthly one, but there's also a spiritual one here because we can see there's a connection also to pride. And that's a heart condition, which, like the builders of the Tower of Babel, these are people who seek to exalt themselves and place themselves on the throne, make themselves high, make a name for themselves rather than for Elohim. And we know that those who exalt themselves with pride of heart, who make themselves high, will be humbled by God and brought low. And we see that literally here in this scenario. You're going to be brought low. You're going to be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. So that's an interesting connection from one who makes themselves high and falling to this lowly state. So they may be big and mighty and tall in the earth and in their own minds, but the day will come when they will fall. And that also reminds me of Messiah's parable of how those who do not hear and obey his words are like men who built their house on shifting sand. And he said that the house that they have built up will fall, and great will be its fall. And this is kind of something we're going to see repeatedly. Back to Genesis 6:4. So Strong's calls these Nephilim fellers because they have fallen. Could we consider Satan to be a Nephilim? I was just pondering this. Well, he is literally a fallen one who fell from heaven to earth. And Yehoshua himself bore witness of this. So looking at Luke 10:17 through 20, says, and the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us through your name. This word subject means to be put below. So even the demons are made low, below our feet, if you will, through the name of Yehoshua. Verse 18, and he said to them, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. Behold, I give you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the authority of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall hurt you. Yet do not rejoice in this, that the evil spirits are subject to you. Rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. So your names are written in a high place, and they are being brought low. This just seems to be directly related to what we read in Isaiah 14. And the words fall from here, when he says, I saw Satan fall from heaven, these, if you look into the Greek Septuagint, correspond to the word used in Isaiah 14 for fall. So there is, I think, a definite connection there. So make note that Yehoshua tells his disciples not to rejoice in the fact that these demonic spirits are placed under our feet, but rather rejoice knowing that our names are written in heaven, in the very place from which Satan fell. I want to bring out the fact that our names are written in heaven, but Satan's name has fallen from heaven. And we're going to see later how these Nephilim are also called men of name. Another connection to Satan falling from heaven is in in Revelation 12. We're going to read verses 7 through 17. And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels warring against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels warred, but did not prevail, nor was place found for them in heaven any more. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a great voice saying in heaven, now has come the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers is cast down, who accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb, and because of the word of their testimony, and they did not love their soul until death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and those tabernacling in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and in the sea, for the devil came down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has but a little time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who bore the man-child. And 2 wings of a great eagle were given to the woman, so that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she was nourished for a time and times and half a time from the serpent's face. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water like a flood after the woman, so that he might cause her to be carried away by the river. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged over the woman and went to make war with the rest of her seed, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Yehoshua Messiah. So here we're learning about a heavenly battle taking place between good angels and bad angels, and Satan and his angels being cast down into the earth. We're told that the devil has great wrath or indignation, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't really pondered that before, because we always read about the wrath of God and how the day of the Lord is coming. But isn't it interesting to learn that the devil also comes into the earth with great wrath? And who is his wrath directed toward? It's directed toward the remnant and the seed of the woman. Recalling the prophecy in Genesis 3, that enmity that remains between the serpent's seed and the woman's seed, through whom the Messiah would come. And here we see a clearer description of who Satan's wrath is directed toward. Those who have the testimony, those who bear witness of Yehoshua the Messiah, and keep the commandments, keep the Torah of their Elohim. He doesn't like it. And this is what he's seeking to destroy. He's seeking to corrupt. But notice the parallels here to what was taking place in Noah's day. There's even reference to a flood. But this flood comes from the wrath and from the mouth of that old serpent, the devil, who seeks to overcome God's people by the deceptive words of his mouth. So just as he did when he beguiled Eve in the garden, because this flood comes out of his mouth. So his intention is to overtake you with the words of his mouth. So this is the idea that comes to my mind as it relates to the Nephilim, or the fallen ones, because it doesn't mean giant like we typically think of giant. It seems to be something more. And in fact, there are other Hebrew words that we could look at in the Bible that are more appropriately translated as giant, such as the word Rephaim. That word means giant, and we can see that here in Deuteronomy 2, 10 and 11. It says the Emim lived there in times past, a great people who were many and tall, like the Anakim, and we'll talk about the Anakim because these are giants, literal giants. And they were known as giants, like the sons of Anak, but the Moabites called them Emim. And so this word giants is the one that I was just speaking to you about. Rapha or Rephaim, meaning giant. The root word, interestingly, is it means healer or health. So you kind of think of a giant as someone who just seems really strong and healthy, maybe. I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I was looking at that. And so it makes sense, like when people would look upon them, there's the sense of dread would fall upon them. These are some really intimidating men. So what I'm not saying, though, is that I'm not implying that the Nephilim were not giants. I'm simply saying that this is not what Nephilim means. It seems to be something a little more fallen ones. I was going to look at the Hebrew text for a moment. Someone's raising their hand. Keith.
Yeah, Tracy. So when I look at that word Nephilim, I never thought it was giants. I thought it meant exactly like you looked it up. It's the fallen ones. So it's saying the fallen ones were upon the earth in those days, meaning those minions of Satan that fell from above, that they were on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons. And so it's those, I believe they're spiritual beings that they're talking about. So I don't think.
Yeah, that could be.
Then you make a good point about then there were the mighty men of old and the men of name, but this idea of who was those Nephilim, I think they're more spiritual.
It's a good point. Yeah, what I wanted to really do just with this study was to help people that maybe haven't spent as much time in it, to just encourage you to go past the translations, because just taking it at surface value, again, giants in my mind means something different than Nephilim. And as we look deeper at the word Nephilim, I think we'll see something more than just big people.
So, if you
so
think,
here, go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to continue saying that. So, to your point, if we go with the Nephilim or these spiritual beings, and we know that they have influence, let's say we get away maybe from the physical thing of the giants, but the fact that Yehoshua in the next verse saw the wickedness of man was great, and every inclination of his thoughts were only evil continually, and maybe those fallen ones, they had something to do with that, right? Because the verse before he's saying that they were on the earth in those days. And without getting into all the controversy of the daughters of men that bore children to them, this idea of the wickedness of man being influenced by these fallen beings, these fallen ones that, like you made a lot of good scripture references to this idea that does exist, that there are these fallen beings along with Satan. So I just wanted to say that he is very predominant in stressing that he knows that man has great wickedness now because of this. So that's all.
Yeah, there seems to be, the scriptures, we can just see it. What is Satan doing? He comes to deceive the nations. And he obviously has fallen, and he obviously brought fallen angels with him. And that's their motive, is to deceive the nations, and specifically God's people. And it's interesting, because it's said that he comes with great wrath. Why? Because he knows he only has a little time. And what we perceive as probably a lot of time is really not a lot when you consider it with eternity. That this time that he's deceiving the nations, this reign of 6,000 years or 6 days, if you will. I think it's interesting. This is the time when we're in the hand of Satan for a time, half a time. These are just things that come to my mind. I was planning on talking about, but it's this is not how it's going to be. We know how the story is going to end. So these are some things I just kind of wanted to focus on, that we're kind of being exposed to this wrath of Satan at this time, but he's the one that's going to fall. And even now, just as the disciples rejoiced, they are subject. He and his angels, he and the demons, the spiritual, these evil powers are subject to us in the name of Messiah, Yehoshua, because he's given us that authority and placed them under our feet even now. We just have to believe that and call upon that because God said it is so.
Can I
Okay.
just I just want
Anything
to say
else?
something.
Did you?
You were mentioning the fact that even when they went out and they were I don't want to say excited, but they said, and even the demons are under our subjection. And Yeshua said, no, slow down there. Just be glad that you are written in the book of life, that you are going to be in the kingdom. That sort of reminds me of,
Right.
even that we need to take heed on that, because even though we will meet people that will insult us, they don't want to hear the gospel and everything, and we know what the wrath of God is set for them, we still have to be, we don't want to have joy in whatever, if they even did something evil to us, that we still want to
Mhm.
have that idea that we are to be, I want to say, in resolve to try to help them so they can break away from that curse and try to, their
Yeah.
souls. We don't want to have, just like when I think the disciples said, "Oh yeah, because the Samaria didn't want to let them in to get some stuff before the feast. Yeah, bring down brimstone and fire on them, Lord." And he said, "No, no, you don't know what kind of mind you're of." And so
Yeah.
this idea that we see his reaction to them rejoicing in having, that their fate is already sealed. We're supposed to deal with people whose faith isn't sealed yet and try to guide them and help
Yeah.
them. Okay? Those beings, their fate is sealed. No matter how much they plead, their judgment it's already been decided. Ours is still in the
Right.
works. Okay? And then when Yeshua said, "And I saw Satan come down like lightning," I don't think that was necessarily because they were messing with the demons. He was talking then. He's saying, "I'm God. I'm the one that saw him fall." Okay, originally, I
Hmm.
saw him fall from the heavens. Okay, so boys, calm down. Okay, I've already done judgment on him and his minions. All right, you be happy that you're going to be part of my kingdom. So I just thought that was interesting. You brought up all those scriptures reinforcing that.
Yeah, I like that too because it also shows Messiah correcting, because it is in our nature to kind of lift ourselves up a little bit and be like, "Oh, looky, looky," and maybe get a little bit prideful.
That's
And
of the
he's kind of going,
flesh.
"Don't do that." Yeah.
That's our flesh talking to
Rejoice
us.
that your names are written in heaven.
Right.
And that's really the kind of the pattern we're going to see in here, is of how the flesh wants to make itself high and mighty and lift itself up. And I'm glad you brought that out, because I hadn't really keyed in on how Messiah is correcting that in that moment. So that's really neat. All right. So this is the Hebrew word ha-nephilim, the Nephilim, that I've got highlighted on the screen here. And so I know I'm getting a little, nerdy with my research here, but I hope that you will appreciate it. So in Hebrew, adding the letter hey to the front of the word adds the prefix the to it. So I'm going to highlight Nephilim. This is Nephilim, I think. Can you see it? Oh, my computer's slow. There it goes. And then the hey is in front of that, the ha. So that hey in the front of the word is making it not say Nephilim, but the Nephilim. So the point being is that it doesn't just mean fallen ones, it means the fallen ones. Adding this hey, the the to the front of the word, it makes it a definite noun or a definite article in Hebrew. And when I was pondering this and looking at the rest of the sentence in Hebrew, I thought, well, there's got to be something to this. So an indefinite article is more general, like saying giants in the land, like how most translations will say there were giants in the land. That's making it indefinite. And to give an example between an indefinite and definite noun, just to make it, this helped me anyway to make it a little more clear. If I were to say, a president lived there, that would be an indefinite article, and I could be referring to any president. But a definite article would say the president lived there, and you would understand that I meant Joe Biden, the president, lived there because I was speaking about a specific president. So if properly translated into English, it would not read giants were in the land or fallen ones were in the land. It says the fallen ones were in the earth in those days. And we can see this Young's literal translation translates it that way, which is really great. It says, the fallen ones were in the earth in those days, and even afterwards, when sons of God come in unto daughters of men, and they have born to them, they were the heroes who from old are the men of name. So this is actually a really good translation of this entire sentence because it accurately renders the definite article for the fallen ones, that they weren't just fallen ones, they were the fallen ones, and that they weren't just heroes, they were the heroes or the mighty men from old, and they were the men of name, which is how it reads in Hebrew. So, in these days of Noah, the fallen ones are in the earth. These were the mighty ones from old, the men of name. It's like, you know who I'm talking about? And they seem to be giving them more of a distinct description. And, like Keith and I were just talking about, perhaps it's telling us, the scriptures are relaying this information to us that they aren't just random people. So if Nephilim means fallen ones, why do most translations translate it as giants? Well, the next thing we should do is look to see if there are any other places that the word ha-Nephilim specifically is used in the Bible. And if we look at Strong's Concordance, we see that Strong's has identified only one other place that the word is used, and that is in Numbers 13. And Numbers 13 is when Yehoshua told Moses to send spies from the tribes of Israel into the land of Canaan to search it out. This was the land that God had sworn to give to the children of Israel. But when the spies came back to give a report of what they saw, some of them gave an evil report saying, there are giants in the land, and there's no way we can take these people. They are greater and mightier than we are. But some of these particular inhabitants they called Nephilim. So we'll read Numbers 13, 22 through 33 to get a little bigger picture here. And they go up by the south and come in unto Hebron, and there are Ahiman, Seshai, and Talmai, children of Anak. So again, children of Anak, and we looked at that word Rephaim regarding the Anakim, and they were described as giants. And Hebron was built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. And they come in unto the brook Eshcol and cut down thence a branch and one cluster of grapes, and they bear it on a staff by two, also some of the pomegranates and of the figs. And that place has one called Brook of Eshcol because of the cluster which the sons of Israel cut from there. Let me switch over to, I just wanted to look at this word Eshcol and see what it means. It just means a bunch of grapes. Okay, I was just curious. All right, and verse 25. And they turned from spying out the land after 40 days. That's also interesting. We have a 40 days period of span of time here, like we do with the flood that lasted 40 days and 40 nights. That just popped out at me. I don't know if there's any connection there, but verse 26, and they left and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel to the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, and they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, we came to the land where you sent us, and surely it flows with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. However, the people that dwell in the land, okay, so this is like a however, like they come out with some good information, but now they're going to give you the bad news. However, the people that dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are walled, very great, and we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And then Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. This is kind of a sentence that I want to bring out, a sentence that we should not have in our own minds as it pertains to our own proverbial giants in the land, whatever that may be, something that you have to go up against. I think that giants in the land exist from the beginning to now in our own ways. We talk about tech giants and big pharma, and there's our own entities that just seem bigger and mightier than we. And the scriptures constantly speak of how if God is going with you, you can take it. You can overcome it because of he who is greater. And that Messiah came to redeem Jacob from one who is stronger than he. Yeah, they're stronger than you, but they're not stronger than him. So this is something we just need to keep in our minds and in our hearts. Verse 32, and they brought up an evil report. This is like literally like an evil gospel, bad news, not good news, of the land which they had searched to the sons of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eats up those who live in it. And all the people whom we saw in there were men of stature. These are some big guys. Verse 33, and there we saw the giants, the son of Anak of the giants, and we were in our own sight like grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. I'm going to switch back to the Young's literal for a moment, and we can see this word that they're again translating as giants is Hanephilim. So there were Hanephilim, sons of Anak of Hanephilim, and we were like grasshoppers compared to them. So they saw the fallen ones, the Nephilim, sons of Anak. But again, giants is not the best translation. But at least here we can see that due to the surrounding context, the Nephilim in this case who are described as men who were strong and of stature, and that the Israelites perceived themselves to be like grasshoppers or locusts in the concordance in comparison to them. So verse 32 said that the men in the land were of great size and of stature. However, the Israelites were especially concerned about these sons of Anak, who were specifically called Hanephilim. Not all of the people in the land, but these specific ones were called Hanephilim. And we get a little bit more description about these sons of Anak in Deuteronomy 9, 1 through 3. It says, hear, O Israel, you are to pass over Jordan today, to go in to expel nations greater and mightier than you. Cities great and fenced up to heaven. And this is another pattern. Cities fenced up to heaven. Think Tower of Babel. Let's build this tower up to heaven. You said in your heart, I'm going to ascend up to heaven. This is a spiritual heart condition as well. Verse 2, a people great and tall, the sons of the giants, whom you know and have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak? Therefore understand today that Yahweh your God is he who goes over before you. Like a consuming fire, he shall destroy them, and he shall bring them down before your face. So he's making them fall. So you shall drive them out and destroy them quickly, as Yahweh has said to you. But again, we also see a pattern of, yes, he's going with you. Yes, he's the one destroying them, but he expects you to do something. Because in doing so, you are acting in faith, that you believe what God said is true. Noah had to build an ark in order to be saved from this flood that was coming, because he was demonstrating faith in God's word. God said, do it, I do it. So there's always going to be action on our part. Well, I shouldn't say always, but I think most of the time, there's going to have to be action on our part, which demonstrates that we believe. Looking at this word here, people great and tall, the sons of the giants. It's just Anakim in the Hebrew. So they're translating the sons of giants, I guess, as Anakim is giant, but we still get the picture that they're big, great and tall. It's not the same word, Nephilim here. So again, the Anakim are descendants of Anak, who appear to be very intimidating, great and mighty men of stature. Of course, this also begs the question that if the Nephilim were in the earth in the days of Noah, and then God sent the flood to destroy all flesh, how is it they are again in the earth at this time? That's a head scratcher. So we can see that it is likely that men chose to translate the word HaNephilim in Genesis as the giants or giants, perhaps because they're connecting these passages referring to the sons of Anak as Nephilim. I just thought, that was an interesting, something to consider as to why they might have done that. Now, I decided to do a word search in the Hebrew text, not in Strong's Concordance, but actually in the Hebrew text for the word, the same spelling, Ha-Nephilim, to see if there were any other places this word and this spelling were used. To my surprise, I found 11 places in the Tanakh where that word, that same spelling, Ha-Nephilim, is used. There may be some different vowel points, but it's the same meaning, same letters. I'm not going to pull all of them up, but I'm going to show a few examples of how some of them are used, because I think it's interesting. Obviously, Genesis and Numbers; those are the first two that are used. And let's see, the next one I found was in Joshua 8:24 through 25 here. And it happened when Israel had made an end of killing all those who lived in Ai, in the field and in the wilderness, where they chased them, when they had all fallen on the edge of the sword until they were gone, all the Israelites returned to Ai and struck it with the edge of the sword, and all who fell that day, both of men and women, were 12,000, all the men of Ai. This word is HaNephilim. They were fallen ones. They fell that day. The same spelling used to describe these men of Ai falling is the same word. It most often, when I was looking at this word search, it most often is in reference to men falling in battle, but not just of the nations. Another example where this word is used is in Judges 20, describing one of the tribes of Israel as being men of valor, like mighty men, who also fell in battle. So Judges 20, verse 46 says, so that all who fell that day of Benjamin were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All of these were men of war or men of valor. So again, we see mighty men falling, Hanephilim. And I may be pronouncing the vowel points differently, but same letters. So these two were fallen ones. And then another interesting example speaks of the time when Jerusalem and the people who were left in it at the time when the king of Babylon came to besiege the city had fallen or fallen away to the king. So this is in 2 Kings 25:11. And it says, "And the rest of the people who were left in the city and the fugitives who fell away to the king of Babylon with the rest of the multitude, the chief of the executioners, carried away." So that one I thought was interesting as well, because this is like this idea of them falling away to Babylon. We're going to see more about Babylon. And then this last one was a little different than all the other ones. And I found this one to be interesting as well. So this is Psalm 145:14. And it says, "Yehovah upholds all who fall," same word, "and raises up all those bowed down." So here, fallen ones do not refer to people who have fallen away from God, but who have bowed down in humility before God. This again reminds me of how all mankind will fall down before him in one way or another. It is a humble yourself or be humbled situation. If the humble servant of Yehovah falls, then Yehovah is there to hold him up, giving him strength to stand. But when a prideful enemy of Yah falls from their high and lofty place, great is going to be their fall. Ultimately, God sent the flood to destroy all flesh because all flesh had corrupted his ways in the earth. And as we'll get into probably the next time we meet, the overarching message throughout the scriptures is of God telling his people not to mix themselves with the nations and their ways, because in doing so, the ungodly will cause his people to turn away from him or to fall away from him. We talked about some of the symbolic nature of Babylon or Babel as a representation of prideful men who seek to build a house and a name for themselves, and how Babel or Babylon means confusion by mixing. That is what Babel literally means. And what do we know about what the future holds for those who remain in this spiritual Babylon, who have been fallen away to Babylon, who remain in Babylon? We know that the great city will fall, and great will be its fall. So looking at Revelation 18:1-5, and then we'll jump down to the end. It says, "And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lighted up from his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great has fallen, and it has become the dwelling place of demons and a prison for every unclean spirit, and a cage of every unclean bird which has been hated, because of the wine of the anger of her fornication, which all the nations have drunk. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth became rich from the power of her luxury. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you may not be partakers of her sin, and that you may not receive her plagues. For her sins joined together even up to heaven, and God has remembered her unjust deeds." So this idea of thinking of Babylon growing and lifting itself up, building a tower up to heavens, I will ascend to the heavens. The only thing ascending to the heavens is their sin. This is what Yehoshua says. Their sins have come up to heaven, and God has remembered. And then jumping down to verse 20, it says, verse 20 and 21, "Rejoice over her, heaven, and the holy apostles and the prophets, since God judged your judgment on her. And one strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So on an impulse the great city Babylon, confusion by mixing, will be thrown down and not at all will be found anymore. So it's going to fall. That is what's going to happen to this confusion, this mixing God's ways with the ways of men. All right, so that was my those are my thoughts on that word Nephilim. I want to move on to some of the other descriptive words in Genesis 6:4. And the next one I want to look at was these mighty men. Before I move on, does anybody have anything they want to say about any of that? Okie dokie. All right, so these fallen ones are also described as mighty men or heroes who existed of old, or more properly, were from old. So heroes who are from old. The word old here is interesting because it is the Hebrew word olam, which doesn't necessarily mean old as we typically think of the word. And if you're familiar with the word olam, I'm sure you'll see why this is a strange word, in my opinion, to use here. But when we think of the word old, like Sarah, when she was going to have her child in her old age, she was old. And I think I put in the wrong verse here. Here it is, verse 13, not 11. She laughed in her heart, saying, "After I have waxed old, I have had pleasure. My Lord is also old." So, we understand that Sarah and Abraham were old when they were told that they were going to have Isaac. That's what I think of when I think of old. So that word here, zaken, just means to be old, aged. Is typically what it means. But this word in Genesis 4, usually 6:4, I keep saying 4, usually holds the meaning of perpetual or everlasting. It's wherever you see that word forever in the Bible, it's this word olam. So let's take a peek at that. Nope. Here it is. So this is the word they're translating as old, olam, properly concealed. It's a vanishing point, a time out of mind, eternity, perpetual. It's kind of like a time outside of time. That's how it's described. This is an everlasting covenant. This is the word that's used. We're going to look at its root word. I'm going to go back to my other program here. And we'll look at the root word here. It comes from the word alam, which literally means to conceal or hide or to veil. It's a secret. So this kind of makes me think, well, what does this mean that these are men of old? These are men of a time outside of time, a man of ancient times, or perhaps outside of our time. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I obviously don't know, but it's an interesting choice of words to describe these fallen ones as mighty men from Olam. And I'm going to move on to the next word. If anybody has any thoughts about that, please chime in.
Yeah, this is Keith. Okay. So I think you made a good point there, because the word olam is, like you said, is out to the horizon, beyond what you can see. And people that were reading about this when this was written in Genesis, this event had already happened it was past the audience that's reading this. So they were mighty men of old outside of that time. I think you make a good derivation of that word being it's derived from outside of our time, that it's like history,
Hmm.
like people that you may have heard of, but there were
Yeah,
legends of
that's good.
their time. They were outside your time, and that they use the word old, but yeah, they were out there in the past olam that you never got to see. So I think that was very
Yeah,
insightful on your part. I think that really works for the meaning.
yeah. Thank you. Okay, the next word I want to look at is the word translated as mighty or heroes, and that's the word gibor. Strong, mighty, brave man, powerful, warrior, tyrant, champion, valiant man. We can see it's usually used to describe someone strong and mighty, champions. Um, the next time this word is used, in fact, which I thought was very interesting, was regarding the man Nimrod. Verse 8 here, we're going to look at Genesis chapter 10, verses 8 through 10. It says, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one, Gibor, in the earth. Just like these Nephilim were mighty ones in the earth. Now we've got this guy Nimrod, and he's a mighty one in the earth. And it says he was a mighty Gibor hunter before Yehovah. That actually means in Yehovah's face. This word before is the face of Yehovah. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yehovah. And what do we know about Nimrod? The beginning of his kingdom was Babylon, and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So this is interesting. We've got this mighty man in the earth who started this whole Babylon thing. And Gibor, another Gibor spoken of in the Bible, was about the giant Goliath, whom David slew in the name of Yehovah of hosts. He's described as a mighty man, a Gibor. Let me just go back here. I'll show you that verse. 1 Samuel 17:51 says, and David ran and stood on the Philistine and took out his sword and drew it out of its sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. And the Philistines saw that their champion, their Gibor, their mighty one, was dead and fled. And there's so much symbolism in the whole David and Goliath thing that relates to what we're talking about. I won't go into it, but he's a fallen one. Look, I mean, he fell. Great was his fall. And their champion, this man in whom these people put their trust, fell. And we know how he fell is David said prior to this, you come to me with sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of Yehovah of hosts. This is how we overcome the mighty ones. So many neat examples in the scriptures. And then we're going to look at this phrase translated typically as men of renown. The term translated as men of renown in Hebrew literally says the men of name. So we have, I'm thinking again about the two names. Like we have the name of Yehovah, we have the name of the beast. One's written in the forehead of one, one's written in the forehead of another. I don't know if that's related here, but it's just interesting to think about. But to be a man of name, it's just basically people know who you are. You've got some fame going on. And so we're going to look at some other examples of where that same term, the men of name or men of name, is used. If you're familiar with Korah and Korah's rebellion in the book of Numbers, we see that Korah and his company were also called men of name, and these were men who came and stood up before Moses. And let's read it. Let's read Numbers 16, 1 through 5, and see if we can see that same picture. Pride of men, pride of heart. Now Korah, the sons of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, took both Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the sons of Peleth, sons of Reuben. Even they rose up before Moses, and I think that's the same thing, in the face, with some of the sons of Israel, 250 rulers of the assembly, elect men in the congregation, men who were well known. This is the same word, men of name. So he's going to bring with them some men of name to come up against Moses. And they gathered themselves against Moses and against Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon you, since all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and Yehovah is among them. Why do you lift yourselves up above the congregation of Yehovah?" And Moses heard and fell on his face. And he spoke to Korah and to all his company, saying, "Even tomorrow Yehovah will show who are his, and him who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. Even him who he has chosen, he will cause to come near to him." So verse 2 calls them men who were of name, well known, men of name. They were men who everyone knew. They had some clout. They could intimidate. I would like to even consider these were Levites, and we think of them as being preachers and those who held the law. And we could look at pastors in the same way. People, these are men of name. Surely they know more than I do. So they would probably be looked at as, oh, well, these guys, they must know what's going on. They're men of name. What do we see these men doing? They were using their status to rise up. Literally, the text tells us they rose up before Moses. They were using their status to rise up in the face of Moses to intimidate him. This rising up illustrating their sense of self-pride, of this is what the flesh does, of wanting to be held in a higher regard above their brethren. They see something and they covet it and they want it for themselves. But what they were actually doing was rising up in the face of God, much like Nimrod. It was a mighty hunter in the face of God, who was the one who ordained these things. Yahweh was the one that said, "Korah, this is what I want you and your sons to do as part of my body. And Moses and Aaron, this is what I want you to do as part of my body." So these are things that were ordained by God. Korah and these men of name had already been given a role and function, but they coveted what they perceived to be a higher or better, more important office. And doesn't that sound like just what we read about the fallen one, Lucifer? He desired the throne of the Most High. These men also said in their heart, "I will exalt myself above these men of God." But do not let it escape you what we read in verse 4. This is how a true man of God reacted. Moses fell, nephal. This is the same root word for Nephilim. He fell on his face. He humbled himself, even before these prideful men, as a true testimony of how a true leader should behave as a humble servant. He didn't come back up and puff his chest and rise up in their face. He did the opposite. And what happened to these men as a direct result of this pride of heart? They literally fell into the earth. So we'll read that punishment, what their fate was here in Numbers 16:28 through 33. And Moses said, "By this you shall know that Yehovah has sent me to do all these works, and that not from my own heart." Okay, so that's important too. Moses is not doing these things out of his own heart, like these men were desiring these things out of their own heart. This is what God has appointed me to do. Verse 29, if these men die the common death of all men, or if they are visited according to the examination of all men, Yehovah has not sent me. But if Yehovah makes a new thing, and the earth opens her mouth and swallows up with all that they have, and they go down alive into the pit, this is where Lucifer was going in Isaiah 14, then you shall understand that these men have provoked Yehovah. And it happened as he had made an end of speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and her households and all the men who were for Korah and all their goods. They and all they had went down alive into Sheol, into the pit, and the earth closed up upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. And this was also reminding me of what we read in Revelation 12 when we talked about the fallen one. Satan fell from heaven. He came to persecute the woman and her seed, comes with great wrath, but it told us that the earth opened its mouth and helped the woman. I can't help but see a connection here of the earth opening its mouth and swallowing up the pride of men, the fallen ones. Perhaps there's a connection. So I think that's all I want to say about that one. And then one last interesting mention of men of name is here in 1 Chronicles 5:23 through 26. And it says, and the sons of the half-tribe of Manasseh lived in the land. They increased from Bashan to Baal-Hermon and Sinir and to Mount Hermon. And these were the heads of the house of their fathers, even Aphor and Ishi and Eliel and Azriel and Jeremiah and Hodaviah and Jadiel, mighty men of war, famous men, men of name, heads of the house of their fathers. And what did they do? They sinned against the God of their fathers and went lusting after the gods of the people of the land, whom God destroyed before them. They're mixing. And the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, and the spirit of Tilgath-Pilneser, king of Assyria, and he exiled them, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and brought them to Halal and Habor and Hara and to the river Gozan to this day. So not only are these men of the tribe of Manasseh, or it looks like Reuben and Gad as well, some of the 12 tribes of Israel called men of name, they're also called Gibor, these mighty men. Gibor, men of name, mighty men of name. And we see a similar situation of men who sinned against God when they mixed with the nations and went whoring after the gods of the nations, because that is what God says will happen when you mix, when you make marriages, and we'll go more into that next time. They will cause your sons to fall away or turn away from me. And then we read that they were exiled or cut off from among God's people. He exiled them. So I just thought this was all interesting to look at by looking more closely at these Hebrew words in this verse and how they're used elsewhere. I think we can get an underlying message and a pattern that emerges. The mighty men, these intimidating giants, whether literally or figuratively, of the earth will fall, but our mighty one will stand forever. So do not be afraid of them. Just like the religious leaders in Messiah's day, they were mighty men, men of name. Do not be afraid of them. For he who is in us goes with us, and he is greater and mightier than he who is in the world. All right, that's all I have. Does anybody else have anything to share or contribute?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good that you took the route where we're trying to define, even in our own day, who these mighty ones of renown may be, or how we have different authority in our life that may go against us. And they pretty much, I feel that they are mighty men, making decisions even in the government or however they're doing their deeds. So
Yeah.
yeah, you really shed light on that as far as what may be to come, and as far as even in our own lives, should Messiah tarry, we still have to deal with these things. I want to say from a biblical world viewpoint on how we handle I want to say the trials and tribulations in our lives, and even in the bigger world around us, what's happening, to visualize.
Yeah. I mean, we can just look at what's happening in the earth today, and we just like, man, it's just getting worse and worse.
And all these renowned ones, they're making all these decisions on how the earth is going to, or the nations or whatever are going to do their thing. And there's not much we can do but trust in the Lord.
Yeah. And we've had, I can even tell you, we've had experiences like this when it came to the jab. There was a time when the giants of the land were saying, you have to do this. And we could have done it and just caved and been like, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't fight these mighty men. Or we can say, Lord, you take this, you take over. I'm trusting in you, and I'm not doing a thing until I know what your will is. And I talked to several people that have come out of it unscathed, and so I know, I'm seeing these same things, and maybe on a smaller scale, but I'm seeing them in our time. Another thing that kind of popped up to me recently was you often hear people say how bad things are in the earth and how bad things are getting, and they feel sorry for the future generations, where it's like, my children are going to suffer. I feel sorry for Ella because of how the earth's going to be when she grows up. And I immediately had the thought that, don't say that. That's giving an evil report, just like the spies gave an evil report. What we should be saying is, she can overcome. She can overtake it because she has God. God goes with her. So she can overcome. She's going to be just fine. So these are things that we can apply to our own lives, that I think that's really what's important, is being able to look at this and go, how do I apply this to my own life?
Amen. Yeah, the children still have hope, because all these things that we're told of haven't began yet, and they need to have faith in, Messiah, and go ahead and live life. We can't be afraid of everything that may happen, because we will be, I want to say, watched over, and you know just be together in the assembly together, so we may all go through this together.
Yeah. We don't want to be the ones responsible for stealing someone else's hope, especially their hope in God, who says you can overcome. So, yeah, definitely a good lesson. Did you have anything to say, Mike?
No, I don't think so. That triggers a lot of thoughts and things that I probably need to look at a little bit closer.
All right.
I'll just mention this since we have a few minutes. So this idea you left off towards the end there, talking of the punishment of Korah, and how he stood up against uh, Aaron and Moses, and they felt that they wanted better duties, because looking
Mm-hmm.
into that, yes, Korah and his sons and some of the men around him, they were all Levites, so they did
Right.
have duties, and uh, their duty that they got assigned was to carry the implements of the tabernacle. So in Numbers, the first part of Numbers 4, it talks about how Aaron and the priests, his sons, are supposed to cover everything in the blue cloths. before they walk up to move from the tabernacle and cover them, and no one's supposed to see them. And then all of the Korah, his sons, and these other Levite families are supposed to carry all this across to their next destination, and then leave it to the sons of Aaron to uncover it and put it back into the tabernacle. And I guess they weren't happy with that because they had, they were questioning that. Why are we, not given duties where we can be, closer to God and see these things, whatever it may be. We can see a reflection of our own heart, how we may think that we want a better duty or whatever than what we've been assigned, right? So it gets back to the flesh. So it wasn't so much, just because we already knew from even leaving Egypt, Korah was already a thorn in Moses' side. It's his brother-in-law, I believe. There's a relationship there. So, they had these fleshly nature things going on that the Bible records, and then we don't really see all the different things unless you really read and see the lineages. You can sort of pick that out. But this idea that they fell to their own, I want to say, desires to be something more than what they were assigned by God, because God told Moses this will be their duties, right? And because he was one of the sons of Kohath. Korah is a son from Izhar from Kohath, so he's down just a few generations. But this idea that they fell very hard when God split open the earth, right? You gave a perfect example. Moses bowed down, and he did not raise up or even say anything to fight with Korah. He just bowed to the earth and said, yeah, you take care of this. I don't know what to do. He's standing up against me. I know that, you'll deal with this properly. So that putting his trust in Yah to deal with it, and we saw that Yah dealt with it pretty harshly.
Yeah. And then that's another thing that we can take to heart, where it's, Paul describes this as a body, and how some people are different parts, a toe, or, or a nose, whatever. And that we're not to look at some of these perceived lesser members as being less significant or less important. We all have a purpose and function that we need to fulfill according to God's purpose. And we're supposed to even bestow greater honor upon those perceived lesser or weaker vessels or weaker members. But in the same way, sometimes those weaker members, which I hate even using that word because I feel like we're all equal in the fact that we have a part to play, and that God has given us certain talents and things to do. But we could look at someone else's gifts and talents and go, I want that. Why don't I have that? Now, there's nothing wrong with desiring to serve God and be, having him develop those things in you. And you can pray about those things and say, Lord, this is what I would like. But then when you start to get that pride of flesh where it's like, I want to be like that. You're making yourself better, and I want to be better. So that's something we can also take to heart and be careful of in our own walk, that we're not comparing our walk to others' walks and the things that they're doing that they might be especially gifted with. Just knowing, okay, well, Lord, what are my talents? What do you need me to do?
Exactly. So I guess all these pictures just paint, it gets back to everything being of don't fall to your own flesh, in other words.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Keith, do you want to close us in prayer if anybody else has anything else to say?
Sure, I can do that. Heavenly Father, may we be blessed today, having studied your words, learning of your truth and your character. Your words became flesh when you sent your Son to lead us away from iniquity. May we follow Yeshua into your kingdom. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.